Okay, good afternoon. We can go ahead and proceed. So quick question. How was the midterm difficulty? It's good? Okay. All right, that's great to hear. So a few things obviously we want to talk about is the schedule, I think, and just to see where we at currently. So last lecture we wrapped up chapter 5 and we had our exam last week. So obviously we have 2 more weeks till spring break. So we have this week and the week after. Then we go on spring break, come back, and then we have our exam too. Okay. So the modality of the other exams is not may or may not be like the first exam. Okay. So just keep that in mind. This is an in-person course. So if the exam is in person, you're all expected to show up, whether you're on Zoom or whether you're coming into class sometimes, not all the time. Okay. So just keep that in mind. And today we're going to start a new chapter. Obviously, that is going to be malicious software. But before we do that, and one important topic that we have covered last lecture, which is about databases in cloud. And once we covered um, databases, we talked about SQL, right? SQL injections. So we're going to do a little bit of kind of a hands-on. You're going to be introduced to something. How many of you have heard of WebGo? Okay, so this is going to be very good. I mean, I think it has SQLi injection. It covers that, and it also covers other things for you that are like kind of curious and want to check out and do a little bit more than uh, than what's there. Then there's a lot that can be done. Okay, so we're going to kind of revisit chapter 5 a little bit to cover SQL injections, and then do a little bit with hands-on, like with Kali Linux. Then we are going to start chapter 5. Okay. So chapter what is currently out is chapter 3 assignment, and that one was released a while ago. So I think it was released beginning of last week. Okay. Does anyone have questions about chapter 3 assignment? Okay. On Zoom. Okay, good. Yeah, so for this assignment, it is very straightforward. You're going to perform offline password cracking using Kali Linux and using obviously a VM. Um, and if you don't want to use Kali Linux and you want to use Windows, that is fine. Okay, you can download Kali Linux on there and just implement it. So the assignment can be done in multiple, or you can say across multiple operating systems. So the first thing that you're going to do, obviously, is to create 3 users. Okay, so you're going to want to create 3 users. The first one has to include your first and last name. Okay, so when you create user, instead of user one, you put your first and last name, and then obviously follow the password requirements. Same for password 2 and password 3. Then you're going to export the hashes of those passwords, so you should know where they're stored. And then you're gonna use John the Ripper, like unzip the rockU.txt file, and then kind of use that to run the type of password cracking using John the Ripper. Okay, so you want to leave it running for 10 minutes, see which passwords were cracked out of the 3 users that you made. Okay. And you basically want to answer these questions, right? So in your report, you want to go over all of these. And then obviously, if usually, and if it could happen, is that within that 10 minutes, nothing will be cracked. So you want to crack it like manually. Okay. So you will go ahead and create a small word list that contains the passwords that you attach to the users. Then you use that instead of the RockU file. Okay. And that should succeed. Yeah, here's a folder for like John the Ripper if you want to download it. And there's like a Word tutorial that shows everything on how to use John the Ripper. Okay, so that is good. Let me just open this. Okay. So obviously the objective is we covered this last lecture as well, is to understand SQLi injections, understand what SQL does. We're going to understand it from a non-vulnerable point of view, and a vulnerable point of view. Okay, so we want to demonstrate numeric injections, how they're done using WebGoat, and then we analyze query logic, okay, and how that can be manipulated, because that's obviously what we basically SQL kind of injection attacks are messing with is the obviously the query that we have, okay. Why it's kind of an important kind of attack that we should cover, because it can expose sensitive information that we have. It can also allow integrity of the data, so modifications, okay, if that is being done, and it can delete certain data, or it can lead to kind of service being not working or invalid. Okay, so it is very important that we do cover it, and it's kind of the top one, or remaining one of the top web security risks in modern systems. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to we're gonna install WebGoat, and it's basically kind of like an open source training platform. Okay, you can use it on your own time. It covers a lot of topics, not just SQL injections. It is made for like educational purposes, and what it does is that basically demonstrates actual real world web vulnerabilities in a kind of a safe environment. Okay, so that is what we're going to be using. It covers kind of like multiple types of injections, broken authentication, and various things. Okay, so it's kind of like you can say the gap to kind of implement or kind of understand the techniques behind the attack and the defensive strategies. So what we're going to do is we're going to need Kali, obviously, and we're going to need to install WebGoat, and we're going to use Docker. How many of you heard of Docker? Okay, that's good. Okay, so that is what we're going to need. So obviously, I think, and we're also going to need Java runtime, and that is environment for WebGoat. Okay, so that is, we're going to access the browser to access the application. There's alternative ways you can kind of launch WebGoat, is you can maybe run it directly on your host OS. Okay, if you have Java and you install Docker individually, then you can do that. Or you can run it inside Kali Linux, which we'll do today. Okay, so let me just launch my virtual machine very quick. And the first thing that we're going to check for is Java. Java should be already installed, and the latest version should be updated by Kali Linux. So you wouldn't have to install that. If you're doing that separately outside of Kali Linux, then you have to install Java. So let us check the Java version that we have. And yeah, that looks about right. So what could happen is that sometime if you're not using the latest version, and this is commonly in Linux, is you before you start a certain task or you want to get certain things achieved and you just want to update your system, you have to make sure well, you use kind of like sudo apt update and upgrade. Okay. Those are the ones that are needed to kind of like update system packages in Kali Linux if you're using an older version. Okay. And it doesn't hurt to do that from time to time, and just updates everything that is there. So sudo update, that is going to update everything that we have. So there's the command here if you need to install Java. And I think if you're using Kali Linux, you will not need to do that. But if you're using maybe like Ubuntu or another kind of Linux distribution, this is what you would use to kind of install Java. Okay, so after we have the version of the Java, we can install and proceed with the next step that we have. Okay, so Docker, right? So obviously it's a platform, and that is going to run application inside these kind of containers, isolated containers. And these packages that have application with all the dependencies. Okay, so you're kind of installing one specific application and has all the dependency that is needed. You're not individually kind of just grabbing these kind of dependencies that you do need. Okay, so it ensures there's consistent kind of execution across the environment that we have, and it's used kind of here. We're obviously going to use it here to deploy and run webgoats. Okay, so how it kind of works a little bit about a Docker that we have. We have kind of a Docker client, a host, and the registry. So, and how kind of Docker works in the terms of the example of webgoat that we have here. We use it obviously to run webgoat inside our container. And the client is where we type the commands. So we're going to type commands to access kind of webgoat. And then Docker is going to run in the background. Okay, so it's going to manage these kind of here in the middle. It's going to manage these containers. It can have images and specifically access to some servers here. And that is running kind of the instance of webgoats. Okay, and the registry is where webgoat image is downloaded from. So we pull obviously the webgoat from the Docker Hub, and then the Docker stores the image locally on the host. So then we can run that and the image to create a container. Okay. So then we access webgoat through kind of a port and through HTTP on the browser. There's a lot of packages to be upgraded. I think we will be fine with the current Java version that we do have. Okay, so the next thing that we do is install Docker. Let's install that very quickly on Linux. So we're going to do sudo apt install docker.io. For the ones that use Docker, what did you use it for? The ones that heard of it, they raise your hand, students. Yeah,
I kind of just mess around with it.
okay. Anyone else? You guys just heard of it, but have used it before? Yeah,
I used it once to. Right.
okay, that's about it. That's fine. Which one? The one we did that to update or the Java version? Yeah, that one, the update, and then the ABT upgrade. Okay, so obviously when you're using sudo, you have to enter your password, and it's going to download all the dependencies automatically that come with Docker. Okay, so after we have Docker, what we would want to do is we want to run this command to see if it installed correctly. So Docker run hello world. Okay, so that is what we're going to do very quick. Then we can add our Kali Linux or Kali as a user to Docker so that we can run it without a sudo command. So let's run this very quickly. And that should show Docker run hello world. Okay, give me a second. We might have to do the steps first. We might have to start the Docker services. So we'll do this command first, very quick. That starts the Docker in the background. So I'm going to go a step back here. And we're going to run that command first. Does anyone know how to minimize this where like it's okay, that's good. Okay, so let's start Docker very quick. So we're gonna do sudo and then systemctl starts Docker. Okay, that should start it for us. Yeah, this is messy the way it looks. See if I can minimize this. Okay, that's a little bit better. Okay, so that starts in the background. Then we're gonna add a user to Docker very quickly. So we're gonna run the second command that we have here. Okay, so that is the sudo user mod. It's kind of similar to when we did adding a user or kind of a user to a specific group, and that group could be a role. So we're gonna do sudo user mod and then ag docker, and then we're gonna add Kali to that. Okay, and then we're gonna apply these group changes. So that refreshes the memberships. So new grp docker. Kali docker. Yes, let me see something. Okay, and then Docker run hello world. Okay, yeah, it should show something like this. Hello from Docker. That means we are good to go. Okay, so the next thing that we need to do before we can kind of start the SQL kind of injection is that we need to kind of install the last thing that we have is the webgoat. So you can do Docker version here, and it would show you the Docker version that you have. So we're using the 27, and we're gonna pull webgoat. Okay, so that is the idea of Docker, right? We're gonna pull webgoat as an image from Docker. So we're gonna do Docker pull webgoat slash webgoat minus a dot 0. That's gonna just load very quickly. Yeah, I think that webgoat is made by
Oh,
yeah. Which one?
Select two.
Yes,
Oh,
this one
one.
or down more that one.
No, it's like this way.
Oh, this way up.
Yeah, because after I do my update, I didn't do the second part
Oh yeah, it's fine.
for the side.
No, you're good. I think the one that is made, they have a website that you can access. So if we search webgoat here, yeah, it is made by them. So there's a lot of things that they do have. So even when we did, I think like Google Dorking for one of the other classes, we used their website. Okay, so the next thing that where we are now is installing kind of obviously webgoat. So you're gonna have an assignment about this. So just to let you know, coming up, I don't know which assignment exactly detailed wise, but you're gonna have an assignment about like chapter 5, and that is in relate to WebGo. So this is kind of very good, but we won't go through obviously everything that the assignment might require, but we cover a good portion like setting it up and just give you an introductory about it. Okay, so let's see where are we at. Well, that is done. The next thing that we're gonna do is to run WebGoat, right? So the internal port that is using by WebGoat is the 80.80. We cannot change that. We can change our local port to be whatever we want. I'm just gonna keep it the same. That is fine. Okay, so that is gonna just like starts a container from the WebGoat image. It's gonna launch the WebGoat server inside the container, and then it maps the ports to the host system by basically the 8080 to 8080. Okay, and then we can access that specific port on the web server. Okay. Here the 9090 is used for like a WebWolf companion app, so that runs inside the container. So it's just browser that connects through the mapped host port. So that is the next command that we're going to run here. So let's run that very quick. SP. Oh. Are they gonna hold one of the internship fairs this semester for spring semester, or they usually only do it for fall?
That's the next one, I think.
Oh, next week? Oh, okay. That's good. That's good. I have not heard anything, so I would have like made an announcement. How many of you guys are going or plan on going? Okay, that's good. You guys think it's useful? Like if you have went before, kind of? Why is that?
I thought it was more useful for person one than. From my experience,
Did you guys have any acquaintances or like maybe friends that went and maybe like found something like a position or an internship before? Yeah, yeah, that's good. I think one thing they can do um is kind of like to kind of have it where it's like um the big area of the where they host it like the Amway Center is to have it for like the all the STEM majors, not kind of keep like the STEM majors in the back. It becomes really crowded. And I think one thing that they did is good is they announced which companies go or are plan on coming. So that is going to be good for you guys. I think it's the best that if you have a list of which companies that you want to visit and then understand a little bit about them before you go. Because those recruiters are going to ask these simple questions like why you're interested in us or what do you know about us. So it would be good to kind of have some foundational about them. Yeah, so it's very recommended that you guys go to that. So for the ones that are not graduating, maybe an internship, a summer internship would be good. Okay, so that is the next thing we're gonna do. We're just gonna wait for it here to install very quick and load that for us. Okay, so it's gonna stay like this. It's not gonna finish because kind of like it's waiting for you kind of to interact with the browser. Then once you are done, it ends that specific command for you. Okay, so what we're gonna do, I'm gonna make this bigger here, a little bit bigger, and I'll switch back and forth. I'm gonna wanna kind of make this. Yeah, that is very bad the way how it looks. But the next thing that we'll do is kind of navigate to that right to that port that we did. So our local host refers to our local machine, and the port, the 8080, connects to the Docker container that we have. And then we have webgoat that loads because we loaded it into that specific port. Okay, so we're gonna go here, and then we're gonna do HTTP and 2// local host 8080 and then / webcode. Okay, so this is kind of like a vulnerable web application, and it has like a lot of kind of like you can say task or related things in terms of like of security. So the next thing that we're gonna need to do, I think, is to create an account. So yeah, it's gonna load up, then it's gonna ask you to log in. So we're gonna register for an account very quick. You can do anything for that, username and password. So let's do that very quickly. So I'm gonna register. Well, I actually have an account, but I don't remember the username. Could be this. But if you don't have an account, you would want to register yourself. Okay. And whenever you are completing the assignment, what you can do is you can just go back and log into your username and password, and then it would kind of store what you have done so far. I'm gonna go back and see if I can log into my account very quick. Or I'll just make a new one, that's fine. So I think it has to be lowercase. Okay. Does anyone know how to make the Kali screen a little bit bigger here? It's kind of like very hard to kind of full screen mode. Let's see. No, that's still the same.
What happens like
How do we get out from this one though?
right control?
Right control. F11 or something. Just do the plan here. See what's going on. Oh, not even that. I don't know what I clicked. F11. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Oh, oh, there we go. Okay, so what's going on here though in Cali? I don't know. Let's shut it down very quick, save the state, and then rerun it very quickly. Yeah, you said you usually do what? You do view and
You do it really down to the bottom virtual screen one, and then I rescale it to be bigger.
to the bigger. Okay. Everything is so much easier on the desktop, but okay, so let us run it back. Have a comment here. Scale mode. Okay. Yeah, we'll try that next. Ah, this is weird. I don't know. It's running, but let me look into this very quick. It's weird. See if I can just close it and then power off instead. Yeah, that is weird. Yeah, here we go. It's good. Yeah, I think it's still, we need to rerun it probably. So, yeah, gonna go back here and try to do Docker run and run the port again. So we're gonna do run the Docker and then run the okay. Let's go back to firewall flags. And then this time we're going to run it. So HTTP, and that's going to be forward localhost. See, this is try again. Hold on, I'm wondering if we need to. Okay, no, I think it should be good now. So right here, I'm gonna refresh. Yeah, it looks like I need to repeat just the start Docker very quick. So we're gonna do a sudo system. Okay. And then the Docker button, hello world, just to make sure that it's running. Okay, that is good. And we should have Docker Pro web go Okay, we have the latest image. So the next thing that we do, run that again very quick. Let that run. Yeah, we don't have much after we load it very quickly, and then we'll do a few tasks. That will be it for SQLs. Okay. It's weird.
I think it's just the one more, as in with the software.
Does it?
Yeah.
Oh, see. Let's use the one from the command that we have here. I see. Yeah. So that means it could change it sometimes. It's not always the same. Okay, so that is going to be 80 slash what the no, it's not it. It should be locus localhost and then maybe then okay, that's good. Username is invalid. Let me try the other username. Make a new account very quick. It's very weird. Then I'm gonna accept. Sign up. Okay, that is good. Okay, so we have access now to kind of WebGo. So they, like I mentioned, it covers a lot of things like software, data integrity, vulnerabilities, security misconfigurations, and much more. So we're gonna open the A3, I think, and we're gonna open the SQL injection. Okay, that is made by them. So we have this right here. So we're gonna do intro here, and it should load up a couple of things, kind of like lessons. But those lessons are made where it's kind of like the system is vulnerable and we can kind of mess with it. Okay, so we'll do a couple of these. I don't want to do all of them, but for your assignment, you would want to go and complete all the tasks. Okay, so obviously this talks about SQL and what the language is. It talks about like DML, data manipulation language, DDL, and DCL as well. String SQL injection and numeric SQL injection. Okay, so let's go to number 2 very quick. And we know that SQL is going to be used kind of like to manage databases, our first chapter was about databases, right? And we know that the data is usually organized into tables. And we mentioned there's a couple of alternative names for the tables, like the headers and rows, like tuples and columns and whatever. But each row is basically going to contain one record, okay? Or it's going to kind of like represent an attribute that is going on. So here we kind of have an employee table, and this is kind of a common table that we would have, like, right, for our database, and has like a list of names, last names, their department, and salary, right? And then we're going to basically kind of retrieve. Without SQL, there's going to be a very large load time to kind of retrieve certain information from databases. That's why we kind of have SQL, right? So the three main categories of SQL commands are DML, data manipulation language, data definition language, and data control language. Okay, so for example, here it's asking us, we want to retrieve certain information for employee here, Bob, that we have, Bob Franco. And then it's asking you that know that you have full administrator privileges. Okay, so and if we go back to this slide here, right? The one that is here. We talked about a couple of these, like select, from, and where, and those are part of, like, you can say syntax for SQL query. Okay, so we're going to retrieve the name that is mentioned. Okay, so by basically select department, so we're selecting specifically from the column that we want to retrieve the employees, and then where's the first name? That is Bob, and the last name Franco, right? And that should kind of like, and we set the conditions that must evaluate to true. We're going to see how this can be manipulated with SQL injections, and it should result us with the output of marketing. So we're going to go back here. We're going to do select, and it's very case sensitive here. So when you specify the name, it needs to be mentioned as is. Okay, so select department from from employees, where first name is going to be always Bob, and the last name is going to be Franco. Okay, so we selected that name and we have successfully succeeded. So that is what's happening kind of when we are retrieving information, maybe when you're logging into your kind of certain browsers, or kind of retrieving certain informations from the browser. That is kind of what is happening in the background, right? So why this matters is because the injection manipulates the where clause that we have to use, right? So to exploit SQL, you must understand the typical behavior first, that behavior that we just did. And if you don't understand the select and then the where injection, it will not make sense to you. So we first want to understand the logic and understand how attackers alter the logic. We're going to do a couple of more. So as we said, we're going to move into DML, and that has a little bit of more commands. Data manipulation language has also select, insert, update, and delete. Okay, so we're going to do a quick task there, and then we're going to move to the vulnerable injection, or SQL injection specifically. Okay, so that is going to be 3. We're going to move to 3 here. Okay, so we have select that retrieves the data from the database, and we did that. Insert would insert a new data into the database, and then we're updating some databases for using update, and delete to delete a record. Okay, so here what we have is we want to kind of, and it's going to ask us to kind of delete or update to change Toby Barnett to Sales. Okay, so I think he's probably in another department, right? And then we want to update him to kind of Sales. So we're going to kind of use update here. So we have update here. So we're going to update an existing user or existing database. And these are kind of the privileges that we talked about, right? Kind of similar to the second part of the chapter is the access control policies that we give to the users, whether they can do update, delete, or just insert data into the database. Okay, those are going to be very important when it comes to the database because we can have internal threats, and that is one of them. Okay, so we're going to do update. Now it has to be all in uppercase. The employees. And then we're going to do set department. And it would be sales here. Close that. Where first name is going to be Toby. Yeah, I think it's Toby. Yep. And last name, so we ensure that there's another argument there. And last name will equals Barnett. Okay, let's check that. If we don't have any syntax, it should move it, right? So we have Toby, and now the department has been changed into sales. Okay, so that is another thing. Obviously, we mentioned there could be manipulation with the update and delete. An attacker could change the salaries, for example, change the roles or permissions, so the integrity data can be compromised. So understanding the correct update logic is going to be critical, right? So the next thing that we do is how attackers alter these statements. So we move, I think, to numeric SQL injection. We're not going to do the other one. I think there's another one that we have, but we are going to do, yeah, there's string and there's numeric one. Okay, this is similar to the video that we had last time with the login count and the user ID and how the user was able to get access kind of to the user or kind of like confuse the system and gain access by kind of like modifying the portion of the query, right? So here we have, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. And this is kind of specified here that we have it select from user where login count, and there's an issue here that is kind of like vulnerable and that attackers can be using. So the user input is directly concatenated here, and there's kind of like no parameters or no sanitizations, and the query can be altered, the structure of that given query, right? So we know there's a vulnerability that kind of exists here, and we're gonna kind of use that to kind of like bypass the system. Okay, so the understanding or the intended logic should be like this. It shouldn't be the way it is now because that is vulnerable. It should be where that both conditions must be true. The login count that we do have and the user ID. Okay, and then it returns one specific user. So that's the normal filtering behavior that we do have. Okay, so what are we going to use for kind of the inputs is we're going to kind of go back here and we're going to put the login count to be 1 and the user ID to be 1 or 1 equal to 1. Okay, so 1 to 1 is always going to be true. And where clause becomes logically also going to be true here. So the database is going to return all the given rows for us. So let's go back here. So we're going to do 1 for here. And then we're also going to do here 1 or 1 equal to 1. That's going to retrieve a lot of information for us. It's going to retrieve the user IDs that we have, kind of the names that we also have. It retrieves like also kind of various things like I think credit cards here. Okay, so database is going to return all the rows. Why this works is that obviously because this is what the SQL injection is. Basically, it trusts the numeric input. The input becomes kind of like the SQL logic, and then that operator that we use kind of alter the query behavior. So there's no kind of validation that prevents the manipulation that we have done. Okay, from a security impact, we have kind of have data that is exposed, credit cards numbers that are visible, entire table is retrieved, and the confidentiality is kind of being compromised. Okay, so the same flow could allow delete or update or delete attacks. Does anyone know, we mentioned the types of SQL injections in the last lecture. Does anyone know what type of SQL injection attack we just did based on the example that we had. We had in band and we had out of band, and we also have I think the inferential kind of blind SQL injection. Okay, so this type of attack or SQL attack is going to be kind of like the in band, right? So the data is returned in the same HTTP response. So the attacker sees the results directly in the application as it kind of showed here. So it retrieves all rows using OR 1 equal to 1. So this is what we have just demonstrated. Just to remind you that we have the blind SQL injection is there is no direct data that is returned. So it observes the behavior instead, and it uses kind of like Boolean or time-based technique. And we don't want to get in depth to that, but that is the kind of the technique that we have, or a type of SQL attack. Then we have out-of-band SQL injection, where data is going to be kind of like separated into kind of a different channel. So it uses like DNS or HTTP callbacks. Okay, so that is going to be used when direct responses are not available. How can we defend against SQL injections? Does anyone have any kind of like techniques or kind of ideas? Yeah, yes, that is right. So that is one of them. Does anyone have anything else? Okay, so use kind of like prepaid statements. So first thing that we can do is we can separate the code, the SQL code, from the user input. The input is going to be treated as a kind of a data, and then it prevents that query structure manipulation. Okay, so that's the most effective defense that we have, the input kind of validation. We also have input validation that enforce or strict data types that we do have. So it allows only expected characters. Okay, that is going to be very kind of easy to implement. So it uses a server-side validation. Okay, and it rejects those unexpected inputs. Least privilege principle is that the database account should have minimal permissions. And we talked about permissions, I think, in access control. So we avoid using an administrator level database accounts that prevents the update or delete. So that is kind of like a second layer of reduction after kind of the first one has been passed. Error handling and logging. So we don't expose detailed database errors. So log suspicious input attempts and monitor them for abnormal query behavior. Okay, we can also have a web application firewall as well, and that could be there. So as a summary, obviously, kind of you understand more SQL injections, more permissions, more here in the essence of SQL injection or databases. Obviously, we had Linux, Java here that we ran, or is required for WebGoat, Docker that is used to contain or kind of run WebGoat for us, and we are pulling WebGoat from the Docker Hub. And we made a specific port, and that is a specific port that we're accessing a specific service exactly to. So you don't have to use the 8080 if you want. Keep the internal as to the 8080, but you can use maybe 3000, whatever you like. So understanding the foundation, SQL manages the relational databases. It contains structured data, select, retrieves data, update, modifies the data. The where is kind of like the filtering logic that we do have here. Okay, so we need to understand the normal SQL essentials before we do or kind of understand the injections. So what made the applications vulnerable? Obviously, the application built SQL queries dynamically, and the user input was concatenated, right? And so there's no kind of like input validation or anything that is being used kind of to reduce the risk. The demonstration that we did injected logical condition or 1-to-1, and the where clause becomes all the way true, and the databases will return all the rows. So this was an in-band SQL injection that happened in the HTTP kind of as sent back to us. So there's some takeaways obviously that we have here. Injection manipulates always the query language that we do have, and that could lead to confidentiality of or kind of data to be exposed or breached. And the integrity of databases can be compromised if we don't have permissions or if they can be modified. So some proper defenses we talked about is to kind of like modify the queries and limitize them, and then have a least privilege kind of policy that is being used. Okay, so just very quick about our next chapter that we're going to talk about here before we continue. So our next one is going to be about malicious software. So let me kind of go over this very quickly. Obviously, you guys have anyone took any kind of malware courses here? Okay. Which one? Oh, intro to malware analysis? Okay, that's good. You took the same one?
I'm taking malware analysis.
Intro to malware analysis? Okay. So I think these are going to be kind of like piece of cake, right? For you guys. So obviously the defined, obviously this always every chapter starts with kind of a definition for the chapter that we'll cover, or kind of the main idea is going to be obviously malware. There's various types of malwares as kind of like threats, and there's also types of malware families. Okay, so it's going to be obviously a program that is inserted to a system. Okay, and the intent of it is to compromise the confidentiality, the integrity, or the availability of the victims, maybe as a service or as a data or application or the operating system. Okay, so annoying or kind of disrupting the victim. Okay, so a kind of different types of malware that we have here, and we'll cover, I think mostly on Thursday. We'll talk about a few of them now, as we have viruses, worms, rootkits, adware, ransomware, and spyware. These are kind of like terminologies. You guys don't have to remember all of these, but when it comes to this chapter, those are going to be kind of like the main terminologies in this chapter. Okay. So malware can be classified into two things, right? So first, it's kind of classified into a broad category. So it spreads or propagates till it reaches the desired targets. Okay, that is one kind of classification of malware. Then on the action side of the malware, once it reaches, it will obviously deploy. And that deploy is the payload that we do have. Okay. So once the target is reached, can also be classified those that need a host program. So like a virus, those that are independent, self-contained programs, worms, trojans, and bots. So not all of them propagate. Okay. You can have ones that just kind of like that don't replicate, which is like trojans or spam emails, and the malware that does not replicate, like viruses and kind of worms. So obviously, it's kind of like the mechanisms include infection of kind of like the existing content, and basically it spreads to other systems. That is kind of like the vulnerabilities with that comes with malware. Okay, exploit of software vulnerabilities by worms or downloads, drive-by. You can say downloads to allow the malicious or kind of the malicious software to replicate. Okay, and social engineering is going to be used here to perform that. The payload actions that are performed once it reaches the target, it can kind of corrupt the system. We said it can kind of remove maybe data files or have access to certain data files, theft, key logging information, taking information from the system, and doing a lot more, stealing maybe or hiding its presence on the system. Okay, so one, I think for you that are taking the Intro to Malware Analysis course, I think one subject of that is to kind of how kind of is to find that presence of malware, okay, or maybe dynamically analyze malware. So we have attack kits because early malware actors, or you could say, required strong programming skills, okay? And the attack kits are basically, you can say, like a kit that comes with that is made for malware creation easier, okay? So it lowered the technical aspect for these attackers or these malicious attackers, and it's kind of also known as the crimeware. Okay, so it's kind of like ready payloads that can be used, and they can already propagate, or they have some propagation techniques. So it allows even the less skilled attackers to launch these attacks. Some examples of these, like we have Zeus or Black Hole, Sakara, and I think these are family names that we have. So the attack source is that the shift in the threat actors is that early attackers were often individuals, right? That are seeking recognition. Could be that. Today, threats come maybe from organizations. It comes from well-funded groups. Okay, so it moves from kind of like politically motivated attackers, maybe to criminals, organized crimes, organizations that would sell services or kind of information to other companies and nations. It could be national government agencies. Okay, and why this matters is throughout kind of like the different layers that we could have from the attack source. It could increase more funding, higher level of coordination, growth of cyber economy or scale, of attack kits. Okay, so compromised system and stolen data. We have advanced persistent threats, okay, and that is kind of a long-term targeted cyber attack. It's not like a one-time attack. It's kind of like it uses multiple intrusion techniques, okay, so kind of hides its presence and it's focused on maybe an organization or one specific kind of domain rather than multiple. Okay, so behind them usually is going to be obviously like state-sponsored groups, maybe, or sometimes large criminal enterprises. Okay, and what makes them different is because they have a careful target selection, kind of a neat down of selection. They have self-heal operations and remain inside systems for months or years, because the information maybe that is needed or the services that is needed is not as kind of a one-time, maybe through a time spans. So some examples is Operation Aurora that we have, or say Breach or APT1. You can search about these, and kind of these are long-term cyber attacks that are there. So advanced and persistent, and we have threats. Okay, so those are the different kind of characteristics that come with APT, right? So the advanced one kind of use different or advanced techniques of malware that includes kind of like custom delivery of malware that is required. Persistent is going to be kind of like the application of the attacks over kind of like a period against the chosen target. And threats are kind of like selected targets as a result of the organized, capable, or the well-funded attackers, okay, to compromise those specific targets. So those are the three types that we have. So the aim of the APT is obviously to kind of like have, obviously to do the same thing as typical malware is, but over a certain maybe period of time or a longer period of time. The techniques that are used under APT is like social engineering, spear phishing emails, maybe drop-by downloads, kind of with links, compromised websites, vulnerable websites that can be like personnel in the target organization. Okay, the intent is to kind of have to infect the target with very sophisticated malware that have multiple propagations. Okay, so mechanisms and payload. So if they gain the initial kind of access, they would want to kind of deploy different techniques, maybe, and they can be using those kind of to maintain and extend their access. We have viruses, and virus is going to be software that infects the programs. So it can modify them to include a copy of the virus, can replicate and go to infect other files, maybe, and it easily can be spread through network environments. Okay, so when attached to an executable program, a virus can do anything that is permitted to do. Okay, and there's a lot of vulnerabilities that has happened, like maybe with Zoom in 2020, that was kind of an issue, kind of with Windows. They can modify the path and deploy a virus that can kind of like allow to run certain permissions with installations specific to operating systems and hardware, so it takes advantage of their details and weakness. Okay, so the infection mechanisms for viruses is going to be like virus spreads propagation, also referred as to the infection vector that we have. We have the trigger and the payload here, and that is kind of like sometimes known as the logic bomb that is going to be kind of activated when or it's delivered, okay, or an event that happens. And then the payload is kind of what the virus does beside spreading, okay? So it may involve benign or damage some noticeable activities. So this is what we have, kind of the last slides that we do have here. These are notes by, I think, the book. So the virus is in the doormat phase. The virus is idle, and it will be eventually activated at some time, okay? So not all viruses have this stage. The trigger stage that we talked about is that the virus is going to be activated to perform the function for which was intended, okay? That can be caused maybe by a variety of system events. Maybe when you open a PDF or a specific browser or a file, okay? So propagation phase is going to kind of like the virus would place itself into other systems or other programs or maybe to different areas to kind of increase that risk, and maybe not identical to the propagation version, okay? And then each infected program is going to be kind of like contain a clone of the virus, okay? And the execution phase is that the function is performed and may be harmless or damaging. Okay, so that is what we have. So Thursday, we will kind of cover this chapter more kind of in depth and try to wrap it up. And so that will be it for today. We will take attendance very quick. and you guys will be on your way. So if you're on Zoom, and there's no questions, you can guys go ahead and exit. Thank you, Christopher. And thank you, Andrew.